Ladies and gentlemen, very good evening to all of you. I'm here today at an invite from IIM Ahmedabad. But when I got the second invite from Ahmedabad Management Association, I very delightfully agreed to be talking to you today. I came here, I don't know how many of you were in that meeting last time, it was in January of 2018. That's about a little over 2 years back. And if you further recall, this was my first slide then too. But you'll find the difference. If you'd like to see the slides, you can even come and sit in the front if you're stretching your neck otherwise. So it was the same slide that I had, except that, you see the big black swan that we're all seeing today called the COVID-19. I was actually on a Goldman Sachs investors call this morning. At the end of it, a friend of mine also was on the call, called me and said, how did you think the call went? I said it was depressing and depressing and depressing it was. So because, anyway, we thought there is something called the VUCA, which is the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. But nobody ever predicted that there could be a black swan like the coronavirus at this point of time, which has got multilateral impact at this juncture. Giving you numbers, the prediction is right now 50% of the American population will be impacted by coronavirus. That's 150 million people. They're saying 70% of German population will be impacted by coronavirus. That's 60 million people. Just those two numbers, which are predicted by Center for Disease Control, that itself is more than 200 plus million people. You can do your math, where they're saying there's 15% of them are 5% of them are going to be critical, and there could be 2% mortality. I just leave it there. So events of that nature will happen all around the world. But if you look back at what I said, and I continue to believe in it, is that if you look at these 5 forces which have got unprecedented impact on mankind at this point of time, the one which stands in the center is all about the power of disruptive technologies. That doesn't seem to slow down at all. And our belief is actually today there's fairly large amount of research going on in actually not new drugs. Even if existing drugs which are there or existing molecules which have been certified and approved by FDA, if they can be used for at least slowing down the current virus we have. So technology is the key pillar for us. Not that the other 4 is not slowing down either. We still continue to see the rise of East, more amount of growth in the East compared to what happens in West. And we're also seeing that the aging population does not change. Or for that matter, there is one side you have globalization, on the other side you also have return of geopolitics, or people are saying it's the nations which are important as opposed to subscribing to the global economies. So therefore, in a world like this with this unprecedented change, we think that it will continue to be an area which is of great interest to all of us. And look at the technologies which are really changing. It's not just computers. The underlying, of course, is technology. We'll not use the word, actually, Jaimin and I would agree, we have slowed down on using a word called information technology any longer. We're saying this is all technology play which is happening. The business that Jaimin is in and I am in, we're all technology players at this point of time. We're not information technology players as it was about 10 years back or 20 years back. Technology was used providing information to people. It's not anymore true. Technology is now being used for making real-time decision making. So therefore, technology has a different connotation altogether and has an impact in many, technology is making strides in many areas. We have connectivity on one side, which we think is going to be a big leap forward as we move further forward into the world. I was at a meeting too earlier, and they were asking me questions about 5G today. What's India's preparedness on 5G? Now, how many of you are familiar? I think we do have challenges in 5G because we just rolled out 4G. So investments are to definitely bear fruits. And the second one is the new demands that have come onto the telecom companies will not allow them to roll it too quickly. But that will not stop from new technologies coming in, because our belief is, if you look at 5G, the two unique features it will have is that it will be 10 times faster than 4G, and it will have latency which is less than 2 milliseconds. There are applications people never thought about in the past will become reality. People talk about telemedicine at this point of time, teleconsulting. But what will happen with 5G? It will become telesurgeries. Because today you can't move the knife, you can't move the stylus on one side of a wire or a broadband, and you can't expect the knife to move instantaneously. But 5G will make that happen. So those are the strides that technology is making, whether it is in genomics or it is in materials. One of the key things that we all get worried about is actually now people are not doing any more research on just material. It's more to do with bonding. I'm sure several of you heard about the other one which is there called 3D printing, additive manufacturing as it's called. So we think material has strength, but where is the weakness is on bonding. So all this is the research that goes on. And then you look at what has happened with energy. Storage is increasing. Now 300 miles approximately is what Tesla cars are driving with just one charge. We were doing this math about 10 years back. What does it mean to drive 300 cars, using 300 miles using a conventional battery? You needed a 5-ton truck to be driving behind you with a wire connected with the batteries on it. And what has happened with Tesla at this point of time? You don't even find batteries actually. What he has done is he's taken the floor plate and he energizes the floor plate. So that's the advancement that we are seeing on these technologies. But underlying all this I'm seeing here, what you see on the screen, and what I said that time extensively, I'm not going to do that extensively this time, is all about computing, storage, connectivity, sensors, and algorithms thereafter. Even if you look at genomics, the progression of genomics at this point of time is largely an account of computing. So therefore, you can't definitely keep yourself away from technology at this point of time. These are underlying, as I said, was all computing, which is nothing but computing, connectivity is all to do with digital. And here are the three digital technologies which have the highest impact and the fastest growing ones. And these are very fundamental technologies, which are actually, these are the ones which cuts across every vertical, the foundation that we think about. Those three technologies are, one is cloud, the second is big data analytics, and finally the third one is all about cybersecurity. Actually, here is yet another complexity that comes up, is that if you look at cybersecurity, it was not a relevance in the past. But today, the amount of connectivity that's there, if it was isolated your system, you could say, nobody can touch me. How could somebody come into my system? But what are we? Where are we today? We are today in a world where there are 5 billion people and 15 billion things, 20 billion in all, connected together on one network. They can access from anywhere, anybody. Machines can talk to each other. So the result is that, as a result of that, cyber has become another new technology by itself. So we keep saying technologies harp on each other, and as a result, all of them will grow. Cyber would not have been true but for connectivity. But with cyber becoming stronger, you see connectivity becoming more. But then there are also 6 more technologies I like to call out, which are advanced technologies, and we'll spend a little more time today on, need to be careful on my time. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button, but I'll get it straightened out, yeah. So therefore, if you look at the other 6 technologies that we have, is all about the advanced technologies, and I'll call out artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, 3D printing, robotics, blockchain, and finally we have immersive technologies. All these technologies have very high impact on mankind today. We will, as I said, spend more time on AI, but you look at immersive media, and the immersive media at this point of time, which consists of AR, VR, mixed reality, and finally extended reality, our belief is, and there enough evidence on this is a chart actually prepared by NASSCOM, talks about $1.5 trillion of savings for students because of new technology that comes in. You don't go and spend the same amount of money in universities paying for the courses. Each one of them have very high impact on them. We quantify the impact on them. Like for example, if you look at artificial intelligence, they're saying it could be as high as about $6.7 trillion on the global economy today. So the whole world is becoming digital. Let's all believe. And it's a high impact digital. And these technologies, when they're put together right now, is impacting several verticals. Technologies, thereafter, you look at the analytics that you do the business processes, and finally you have new business models all together. And you can name, I probably have on the screen about 8 industry verticals. Whether it's healthcare, it's education, it's agriculture, it's logistics, it's banking, financial institutions, and so on and so forth. But trust me, any possible area that you can think about, there is an impact. And an impact which has got enormous amount of benefit to mankind. A very mundane example is look at an X-ray of chest of a patient today. A naked eye of a doctor is not in a position to see a lesion, say today, whereas there is evidence today to say that the computers can see the same lesion, could have seen the lesion a year ahead of the doctor's naked eye, because of the way in which the images can be manipulated. Even the days and times that we live, you look at a technology like cytology, which is all to detection of, say, cancer. Actually, a cytologist counts the number of cells that are there in a square area. Look at the accuracy with which a computer can do. The grading is based on his judgment. His judgment is nothing but extraordinary. I don't dispute that. We're making the machines to learn his expertise, all right. But he still has the same vision you and I have. The result is that the gradation that he is calling as a judgment call is not necessarily consistent as the computer is. The counting of the cells cannot be as consistent as the computer is. So there is every walk of life that we are seeing today, which is being impacted by technology. Here is the evidence I have to prove my point. Because of this digital disruption that is happening, the lifespan of companies is decreasing dramatically further. Call it good news, bad news, but the news is that. And in one point of time, in 1935, that's impact number 1, I would call it. 90 years used to be the lifespan of companies. Whereas in between, by 1975, it became 26 years. The evidence I had was up to 2010. It's 14 years. These are established companies. These are what is called as Standards & Poor's 500 companies. S&P is the barometer of an economy of a nation, is what people call it. This is the S&P 500 lifespan has come down to 14 years. That's because of technology disruption. Let me tell you something more interesting. The second impact I talk about is that you go back and look at the market cap in 2006 of 10 largest companies in the world in terms of market cap. Highest market cap companies in 2006. Look at this numbers that are there. Which was the highest at that point of time? Was ExxonMobil. There was thereafter GE. You then see one technology company called Microsoft. Thereafter, there are financial companies, which are Citi, or oil companies like Shell, or back again, a retail company like Walmart. These are the companies which are there. Same companies, 2006, right? We're now going to 2016. 2019. I'm not changing the companies. I'm just keeping the companies as they are, those 10 companies, and show you how the market cap has increased. Only company which gets to closer to $1 trillion is Microsoft. The rest of them are there. ExxonMobil still strikes at that $400 billion. The rest of them actually shrunk in size. The biggest shrink you'll say with this particular tall thing called GE. Hold your breath. Now look at 2019, which are the companies which have largest market cap in the world. So I just rearranged this, I rearranged this order and to show you how the same 2006 companies with market cap in 2019, what it would be. And the highest market cap in 2019, actually this is a little dated. Currently you'll see all the 4 top companies are all $1 trillion companies. India's GDP is $2.5 trillion. These market caps of these companies are $1 trillion, and the 4 out of the 10, you look at them, are all tech companies, whether it is Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, or the Alphabet. In some form or other, you could also say Alibaba as well as Tencent do have a fairly large technology play for being where they are at this point of time. So my second point is technology companies are driving the market cap. Technology companies have the highest value with them. Sure. Let me move on to my third impact. What's the third impact we are creating? Is look at the speed at which the technology is reaching out to people. It took 68 years for airline companies to get their 50 million customers. 68 years. And I'm sure, we think electricity was the one which made so much of a difference to all our lives. And that took 46 years to reach 50 million customers around the world. But the popular thing like a computer still took 14 years. What does it take now? Twitter took 2 years. But more interestingly, Pokemon Go took 19 days to reach 50 million customers. So that's the pace at which technology is invading our lives. Let's move on to the fourth impact that I have, is that continuously there's a threat of latecomers. They'll all come and push you up to upstairs. That's what is happening. Literally, you look at the threat that today GM, Ford, or Chrysler face. We never heard about, say 20 years back, the popularity of Toyota, Hyundai, or BYD, and that doesn't stop there. Here are the companies which are bubbling up now. So they'll also push them up. We don't know which one will push them up, but they're all there today. They will certainly make sure that they will definitely push up the early pioneers, unless early pioneers also keep pace with them. You saw one example, for instance, Microsoft did not move at all. They still were in the top 10. They still created $1 trillion. So there is, the world that we live, therefore, is a world which has enormous amount of pressure on us, and I have proved to you that this is not hype. Companies itself have started becoming, longevity has become shorter, new order of companies will come by, the late entrants will push people up, and technology will become very fast. Let me give you one, I'll specifically take a product and show you how it works now. Let's take a product like automobile. Look at this very complex machine. How many subsystems were there? Whether it was an exhaust system, actually you don't know how many subsystems that were built, including there were moving parts. Or there was the steering system, the powertrain, the coolant system, the fuel system, braking system, all of them had, all in all, approximately the average number people talk about is 1,600 moving parts it had. And systems after systems were there. Well, the electronics and technology came into play. A lot of technology started moving into the automobile. These were all incremental innovations, as we call them. Small changes that happened thereafter. What was it? That you could have a better fuel efficient system by having an electromechanical device fitted into your engine. So the fuel combustion can be controlled well so that the carbon emissions could come down. Exhaust, tailpipe, cone pipe did not change. They still were there. So you have those interventions that came in. Or a smaller intervention like you had this, say, automatic wiper. Depending upon the amount of rainwater that was falling on the screen or the windscreen, the speed of the wiper was controlled. That was semi-automatic. We started seeing these incremental innovations. Then came Tesla. Look at what the automobile, when you strip it off, looks like now. The floor plate or the battery that I'm referring to is this one now. That's the floor plate in which he has energized the whole thing. Where is the steering wheel? Where is the powertrain? All of them have disappeared. You directly send now information into the wheels, which have 4 motors in them, which controls the speed. We talked about the powertrain. A part of the powertrain is actually something called a differential. What's the function of a differential? Is when you start taking a turn with your car, the inner wheels of the car move at a slower speed compared to the outer wheels. That's what would happen, right? That's to make sure that the car does not topple around. But and it is a huge mechanical device. Still you should see it in trucks, especially if you safely, when there's a truck parked on the side of the road, bend down and watch it. Huge mechanical structure. But what is it? It's all disappeared because now you can control the speed of each of the wheels just by a signal. Thereafter, what are we seeing at this point of time? Okay, this is the next generation that comes. What is it? You have a LiDAR unit, which is constantly spinning on top of the car and trying to take 3D images, constitute the images to say which is my nearest obstacle that I have. There are radar sensors which are calculating the distance between you and the obstacle. There are several cameras which are being kept on the machine, on the car at this point of time. And there is a small little computer which is located in the located in the trunk of the car. Trust me, it's no exaggeration I have. I'll tell you the truth. There's a very famous, world-famous computer scientist called Dr. Raj Reddy. He was the Dean of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon University. He is actually one of the few Turing Prize winners from India. Turing Prize is like the Nobel Prize in electronics and computers. I used to work with him for 10 years in the 80s. Raj used to tell me all about the driverless car back in 1985. I had this conversation with him. But then at the end of it, I asked him, with respectfully, I used to call him brother. In Telugu, you call him Anna. So I asked him, Anna, what does it mean finally? So he said, Mohan, the challenge we now have is to have an autonomous car like this, to power, the computing power that will be required, will require a 15-ton truck to drive behind the car. But now, the computing power has all become like one cuboid 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. That's all computing that will require. So that is the change that's happening with technology. That's the trend of technologies at this point of time. Let's move on further. So look at what happens then, whether it is Tatas or BMWs or GMs or Toyotas. They can't escape the following changes. There is maturing powertrain technologies. That is what I mentioned about, this differential, etc. All that has disappeared. And they will become more and more sophisticated as we move forward. The second shift that we are also seeing is materials are becoming extremely lightweight. Cars are becoming lighter in terms of weight. As a result, they become more efficient. And the third one is that you see rapid advances in vehicle technology. My colleague has a Tesla car. He lives in Leuven in Netherlands. And he was very annoyed saying that, Mohan, I had a problem with lane shifting. And I complained to Tesla. And they took 6 months to get me a software upgrade. Because what happens, it's a very funny situation. We all say there's lane control within the cars and obstacle control that goes on. Suppose there's a wayward driver in the front who actually he's driving himself, but the car is moving a little bit on the white line that divides 2 lanes. So actually the Tesla car behind it starts thinking that guy is taking a turn to the right. So this car starts saying, no, readjusts itself to the left. But that guy comes back again to the left. So you can play around with an automated vehicle. It could be funny at this point of time. But the truth is that and then they now have a bug. Sorry, they have a fix on it. And what is it? The car did not go to the mechanic to get a fix done. They sent him a software upgrade, and he downloaded it all using his Wi-Fi, sitting at home. And his Mohan, he said, it's working now. The next one is that you see the shift in mobility preferences. All of us love to drive cars. Is anybody in this group who doesn't like to drive a car? That's a natural instinct all of us have. We want to take control of our lives, right? We don't want to leave it to somebody. But what we now see is that there's a shift in our mindset. Mobility will become shared. We like to share with people. Some form you see that, right? You see Uber coming in at this point of time. Uber is an example of shared mobility. And then they also now have, I'm trying to recall what it is, but they can also have more passengers than one. There's some keyword that they use, but I don't recall it. So therefore, shared mobility will be the new one. So therefore, mobility preferences of people will change. And finally, there is emergence of autonomous vehicle. So you should look at what would happen between automation versus autonomy. Do you people think that we have automation in our cars already? Yes, sir. We do. Yes, Suhas. You're right. Absolutely. Look at small things like, automatic gearbox we have. I'm sure several of us have those cars. You don't need to do the stick shift. What it does is based on the power that's coming on from the engine, it's the traction that you have, it changes its gears on its own. Or I gave you this other example, the windscreen would change its speed based on the volume of water that's falling. Right? So therefore, there is automation at this point of time, but where does autonomy go is there are 5 levels in which it goes. Level 1 is, it says feet off. You don't need to use your feet. Level 2 is your hands off. Level 3 is your eyes off. Level 4 is mind off. And level 5 is everything is off. So that is what will determine the future. And this is what we see happening at this point of time. And that is, there's personally driven vehicles. We'll move towards shared driven vehicles. We're achieving the shift. But even personally driven vehicles become autonomous, and then the shared vehicle become autonomous. But here is the key thing. How does the cost then change? Look at the benefit today for a mile of a personal car you drive. This is the US numbers, all right. Cost per a mile in the future state is about 0.97 cents, 97 cents it costs you. When you start sharing with others, it goes to a number called 63 cents. Whereas when you start getting autonomy in your car, it goes down to 46 cents. But you get to shared autonomy, it gets down to a number called 31 cents. Look at therefore, the point I'm driving. I said I drove about technology, but I'm also driving one more thing. Technology will make things much cheaper. Let's move on. And then this is what we predict will happen to the total miles driven in the United States by 2040. As much as 80% of miles will be driven by autonomous vehicles, whether it's shared or it is going to be personal driven vehicle. That's stunning. Actually, I keep joking that the day will come where you don't need to go to bus stop. Bus will stop where you are, because the computer knows that you have a need, and where you are, the bus knows. So therefore, bus will stop where you are as opposed to you going to a bus stop. I'll stop there and then look at a little more in detail. I know I've been talking for a while, so this is the last part, I believe. Yeah, the third part and last part I have is about all-pervasive artificial intelligence. What is this AI all about? To me, there is AI, what does it do? A, it does sensing. B, it starts comprehending. And finally, what it does is it acts. So there's 3 stages in it which acts. Currently, I think a slightly dated slide it is. In terms of sensing, actually the computers are doing an amazing job in sensing all the 5 senses God gave you and me, all of us. Whether it's feel, it's the vision, it's the sound, it's the smell, and finally the taste. We still don't have many use cases in terms of smell and taste, except we keep saying you can detect spurious alcohol using IoT devices. Computers can detect that now. It's a question of how expensive it is, how invasive or non-invasive it is, and so on and so forth. But it can. Or we can say you can smell a perfume to detect how good it is to your senses. If you set up your senses in a particular variants, it can smell the perfume and tell you what it is. These are not great POCs. But you look at the proof of concepts that are there on the other 3 senses that we have. Amazing are the applications. We can, people say, what do you do with sound? I'll share with you a very common man's mundane example with you. Water did not get pumped to your overhead tank, right? So what was happening? You put on the switch and the pump was making some sound like grrr, and water was not going up. You called the motor mechanic. He came, he did the same, but he said one thing, sir, isme bearing gaya hua hai. So how did he detect that bearing was gone in the motor? He actually heard the sound, he processed in his brain, and then he amplified through his voice. Same thing the computer can do today. So long as it can learn what exactly, so therefore it has to learn first. What does all these sounds get? And you and me, I'm sure many of you, if not all of you in this room could be much younger to me, you're much smarter than me, you could probably remember the sounds. Old people like me, they don't. But irrespective of how old the computer has become, if it has got more data, it probably learns, it has much more ability to understand what is it which is exactly causing that particular sound. So therefore, we think that as a result of this, there are a number of illustrative solutions that are there. You're now seeing chatbots, which is basically people call robots, which were there. Physically, we were seeing them, but now they're chatbots at the back end, which understand your voice, do natural language processing. That is fairly important. They create what is called as the knowledge representations, and finally tell you how to act. Move forward, we think that even in AI, it's moving towards from AI, it's becoming machine learning, to deep learning. That's when you think that the outcomes are going to be a lot more accurate compared to what they are in the past. And all this is possible because of the phenomena that's happening with technology at this point of time. So you see that there is the technique which aims at mimic human capabilities are basically to do with AI. But more intensely thereafter, it's a subset where AI is aiming to learn and make predictions, whereas machine learning through statistical methodologies does more accurate outcomes. And then you get into deep learning thereafter. So therefore, let me tell you what is today trending in artificial intelligence. What technologies are making the difference? What are the areas which have got an intense impact at this point of time? It's a very busy chart, but let me make it as simple as you can for you. On the x-axis, what we have is market strength. On the y-axis, we have industry adoption. Market strength, in very simple terminology, is all about what's the demand for such type of technology in the market space, or what is the addressable market that's there. There are several parameters on which it's been defined. All have been put together to say, and the technology adoption on the y-axis is all about saying how well people are adopting it. So while there are if you see as the top right-hand corner, necessary, you'll find things like facial recognition, which means that the addressable market is very large, as well as adoption is very high. Whereas if you look at threatening type of environment, we all believe that there's a huge market opportunity, still adoption is not there. So let me take 4 examples, which is necessary, which means that it is on the top right-hand corner, and give you an example why it is being adopted so well and the market is large, is primarily to do with what is called as edge AI, or you also call it as edge computing at this point of time. What we are finding is that there is a necessity at this point of time with several applications to start processing locally. You can't even look at an example like, autonomous cars we talked about. Assume for a minute you don't have the Wi-Fi connectivity. What happens to you? You're stranded. I belong to a generation where I went through those processes. Actually, not necessarily even having not having a Wi-Fi connectivity or broadband connectivity. We used to use these PDAs, personal navigation systems, PNS, on the cars in the United States. And suddenly it would take you to a wrong place, and then after that it used to just go blank. And what is the choice you had was to reboot the system. At least the saving grace used to be that. So therefore, if you look at an application like navigation, you should have the ability to have some of the data already downloaded, but more importantly, the ability for computers to calculate right there and use algorithms on that data. That's edge for navigation. Or you look at what happens in case of access now based on facial recognition. You can't, in an office, if you say, they look at me and say, let me in, the door opens. You can't say, let it go to the cloud and then process it somewhere and come back. I can't be waiting there even for a couple of seconds. The queue builds up. So we need to have edge computing or edge AI capabilities right now. These are the ones which are in that particular top right-hand quadrant called necessity at this juncture. And then, if you look at the next quadrant that I have is transitionary. Transitionary are the ones which we put them in this top left corner rather than the right corner, is that we find that in this particular case, adoption is very high, but market is still not there. A good example that I put here is more to do with cyber threat hunting. There are applications people are showing at this point of time how vulnerable are networks. Even there is a report way back in 2016, I believe, or 18 it is, which talks about vulnerability of data on Twitter as well as Facebook. So that particular part, we all believe that technology is there, but market is still not accepting it. But this is all being done by AI at the back end. The third quadrant I have is experimental trends, which means that conceptually it's early stage, but the market is still huge. There are the one which we have as an example here is the next generation prosthetics, where enormous amount of flexibility has to come to the machine. We think that the experimental part, which is in the very early stages in terms of technology, and also very early stages in market. Market is still not completely discovered, but the belief is that this has got enormous amount of potential with AI. And finally, my favorite example here is threatening trends. The threatening trends are the ones which you see on the bottom right-hand corner. And these are actually have enormous amount of market addressability, but technology is still not matured enough. We are seeing that happening with an example like crop monitoring. This is basically also, people call it as precision agriculture. The amount of AI that's running on that application is enormous. It's fascinating. My company does some part of this. What is it? Is that we now, you look at the cross-section of technologies, we fly drones for visuals. We're taking imagery from the satellite for the geopositioning, geosatellite imagery. And then we also are using, the third one, computer vision, geospatial data, and geospatial data is for patterns and impacts. So you look at these intersection of these technologies that are there, technologies which are in agriculture, on the ground, for the ground points, I do the geospatial data. A combination of that, if you look at it, I fly a drone on a crop. And what am I in a position to understand now is 64 different parameters of the ground and the crop, starting from the type of soil, the health of the soil, the intervention that's required for the soil, move on to the crop, which part of the crop, actually you can have a 20 hectare or a 200 hectare farm, but the data gets down to 1 square feet. And you can then do an intervention thereafter, assuming momentarily that there is a pest in one particular corner. What typically a farmer does most of the world, if not especially in India, is that he will spray pesticide for all the 2 acres of land he has. But the pest actually resides only in 1 square feet. With the technology that we are seeing at this point of time, that you can fly another drone which can precisely go and spray the pesticide in that particular area. So that you and I don't probably consume that pesticide thereafter. Because after all, where is that pesticide going? If the pest is not there, it's coming to you and me to keep us healthier and healthy. So there is amazing applications that are going on. And to us, finally, I'm just winding it up now, is that investments are a clear indicator of future. People don't put money where it matters. So we are seeing enormous amount of investments going on in AI. We're also seeing lots of, I see a lot of young friends here, hiring happening in AI, because that's the future technologies. But at the same time, the heat map, if you look at a spider map I have, in terms of what is happening on different parameters, like what's this preparedness of universities, policymakers, or it is to do with large companies and also startups. India does not show up too well, but the effort that's being put in by NASSCOM, several other agencies, is to the extent that now, actually we just launched it about 2 weeks back, that you'll have AI lessons being taught to students in classes 9, 10, and 11. But there are some barriers. We still think that there is high costs for implementation. They have to come down. There is finally, we have to, skilled labor is something which is also, which we need to manage. But we think there are interventions that are happening. We have a platform called the Skills to the Future at NASSCOM, which is managing the skilled labor workforce part. There are still some unknowns. There's concerns about trust, concerns about laws. A good example of that is there's an autonomous car which is being driven, which is going on its own. And there are two people who are running across the street, an old lady and a young kid. Does it at this point of time decide to go to the left and kill either of them? Whom should she kill? Who takes the responsibility thereafter? These are some of the ethical challenges which the policymakers have to address. But the future to us looks as follows. Let me see if I can play. Thank you. I need to get this.